What's up YouTube? Thanks for tuning in to a Hero's Escape. By the end of this video, you're going to know everything you need to know to understand the general story of Heroscape. First, for anyone that isn't familiar with Heroscape, Heroscape is essentially a tabletop war game. The game consists of hex-based modular terrain and miniatures that come each with their own respective stat card with abilities and stats to determine how the figure works. The game features a combination of fantasy, sci-fi, and even historic units to build out the diverse cast to play the game. So that being said, many of you may be asking, what is the story of Heroscape? At its core, Heroscape could maybe be classified as a sci-fi story. It takes place on the planet Valhalla, which is of course inspired by the Valhalla from Norse mythology, where great warriors die and are taken there by the Valkyrie to commence an eternal battle for the rest of eternity. In Heroscape, Valhalla is not a different realm or heaven-like place. It's actually its own planet in the universe. The race that is native to the planet Valhalla is known as the Kyrie, which are largely inspired by the Valkyrie from Norse mythology. These are winged humanoid beings. On the planet Valhalla, there are things known as wellsprings. When someone drinks from the waters of the wellspring, they become stronger, they get mystical powers, and even visions. In the story of Heroscape, several Kyrie have drank from the wellspring's waters, changing them into what is known in Heroscape lore as Valkyrie. Yes, that is also just like the Norse mythology. These Valkyrie become the Valkyrie Generals on Valhalla, who command different armies, each with its own unique traits and characteristics. These generals include Jandar, Utgar, Olar, Vidar, Einar. There's even more that have come out since, such as Valkyrie, Volorak, Revna, Aquila. The story of Heroscape begins with Jandar, who sees visions of war commencing, and a lot of this is told through Thormoon's journal, and Thormoon himself is a Valkyrie who had drinking from the wellspring and was granted these visions. Jandar sees that there is a war that is going to commence, and Utgar wants to gain control of all the wellsprings to channel their power for himself. Jandar does not want this, and so he uses the wellspring to summon warriors from other planets. And this is the common theme. You see that the Valkyrie Generals actually use the wellsprings to create portals, summoning warriors from other planets to fight for them in their armies. Jandar pulls largely from Earth, being units such as Sergeant Drake Alexander, who was a U.S. Army sergeant from World War II. He also pulls knights from medieval times, such as Sir Denric and Sir Dupuis. Sir Gilbert, I think, is one of them. In addition to this, Jandar has Kyrie in his army from Valhalla, such as Raylan the Kyrie warrior, Konkan. There are also others. And then we have Utgar, who also is using the wellspring to summon people to his army. He pulls from planets such as the planet Marro, where he has collected many of the deadly alien race known as the Marro. He also has orcs in his army. You have Olar, who pulls largely from the planet Phaland, and he has elves largely in his army, as well as some other units such as the dragon Charos or the giant Jotun. These rules are not specific. It's not every warrior that's pulled to a specific army is from one of these planets. In fact, you see a lot of crossover. But generally speaking, this is what is seen pretty frequently. Vidar, he has a army largely consisting of Soul Borgs from the planet Alpha Prime. Soul Borgs are essentially robots that were once an organic race that transported their consciousness into robot forms. So a lot of Vidar's army consists of Soul Borgs as well as some humans and some other creatures, but many of them come from Alpha Prime. Einar pulls largely from Earth. You see many historically inspired warriors in Einar's army, from samurai to ninja to gladiators to even British soldiers, redcoats. Aquila, it seems that Aquila's army is largely nature inspired. There are several beasts and other animals in Aquila's army, as well as even Native Americans, from what it appears, who would make sense because they were more in tune with nature. Aquila, all of these armies also tend to have their own their own Kyrie warriors in the army. Revna, it's not entirely clear what all Revna's army consists of yet, but so far we've gotten pirates, we've gotten another sort of robot cyborg type group of characters known as the Isonics. We also have these cultist type things. Some of them are Kyrie, others are skeletons from what it looks like. Volarak is a Valkyrie general that focuses on industry and expansion. We don't have too much for this yet because a lot of them have not come out yet, but basically it looks like they come from some planet with sentient animals that are very industrious, is what we can see so far. And then there is also Valkyrie, which was largely from the Wizards of the Coast run of Heroscape, and it seems that most of Valkyrie's units are D&D inspired. So once Sergeant Drake Alexander comes to Valhalla, he joins Jondar's army and progresses through with Raylan the Kyrie warrior to different tasks at hand. One of the first main story things that happens in Thormund's journals is that Jondar wants to bring as many of the Valkyrie generals together as possible to form an alliance against Utgar, who, of course, Utgar is trying to gain control of the Wellsprings for nefarious reasons. This leads to there being an alliance between Jondar, Olar, Einar, and Vidar. We get to see through this point the main characters going to places such as, largely at this point it's Thormund doing this, but Vidar's hideout is like an underground cave sort of thing. Olar has a nice castle. Einar lives in a grand palace. After this, we get to one of the real main story parts, which is the Swarm of the Marro Master set, and a lot more lore came out with this as Jondar sends Sergeant Drake Alexander with a team of people to go and investigate an area where they discover a Marro hive, which is rebirthing more and more Marro units. This team consists of Sergeant Drake Alexander, Raylan, Shiori, who is a ninja that fights for Einar from Earth. There's also Major Q10 from Alpha Prime, a Soulborg. And then there is Somlin, who is an elf wizard from Phelan. So, of course, when they go to this place, they fight an onslaught of Marro in a deadly battle that ultimately leads to them destroying the hive and its hive lord. Some of the lore of Heroscape is a little bit it's a little difficult to place the order of when things happen, but the Heroscape comics, for example, depict a different set of events. If you want to actually go through each of the comic issues, I have a series on this channel where I do a full read through in different voices for each character and animations to go through the panels of the comic. It's pretty entertaining, so definitely check that out. But essentially what happens is, in the first comic, Sergeant Drake Alexander is fighting with Jondar's army alongside a Viking warrior that goes by Hal, or Halford, something along those lines. Halford wants to be a great warrior. We'll say Hal, because I'm not sure if Halford's right, but Hal wants to be a great warrior like Sergeant Drake Alexander. He's eager to use Sergeant Drake Alexander's katana, which was gifted to him by Jondar. And this is actually the katana of Thorian, who is a great Valkyrie. Essentially, they get attacked by Utgar's forces. The dragon Mimring comes in, causes havoc. Some Marro warriors come in. Sergeant Drake Alexander hands his katana to Hal. Hal drops it, and then Sergeant Drake Alexander is forced to fight without it, which he resorts to using his grapple gun. Eventually, the dragon Mimring kidnaps Sergeant Drake Alexander and flies him off to a hideout of Utgar. This leads to the next issue where we see Sergeant Drake Alexander behind enemy lines in Utgar's hideout. Grimnak the orc is doing experiments on him, and Nigaxa is there and tries to use his mind link, but Sergeant Drake Alexander spits on him and breaks the mind link. And then, luckily, the band of heroes breaks in with Raylan and Hal and some others, and they free Sergeant Drake Alexander. This later leads to a point where our heroes are fighting the forces of Utgar, and they believe that Raylan has been kidnapped, so they are in there trying to find Raylan. There's a shadowy figure telling us about their secret plan and the new rider for the dragon Mimring, and it eventually turns out that this new rider happens to be Raylan, who reveals herself to the heroes, who are all dumbfounded to see Raylan fighting with Utgar, and she insists to go back to Jondar. There's no one to save here, that she's exactly where she needs to be. Eventually, we find out that Raylan is under the control of Kimoshi, a Marro war witch, who is using an amulet to control Raylan. But it does sound like there is some new lore from Renegade Studios that is supposed to give us some answers about the truth of this. So Renegade is trying to pick up where that left off. Going back to Thormoon's journals, eventually the heroes get through the Marro Hive area and end up in the lands of Aquila, where they are greeted by Kyrie of the Moon Tribe, who are Aquila Kyrie. They notice Sergeant Drake Alexander's katana of Thorian, and basically Thorian was someone that they looked up to and all this, so they welcomed them in. This is where the lore stopped for the Milton Bradley version of Heroscape, when it was passed to Wizards of the Coast, and Thormoon's journals did not continue from that point. Fast forward to 2024, 2025, now Renegade Game Studios has acquired Heroscape and has continued the story, but there's been quite a time jump here, as we are now at a new era, the Age of Annihilation. This starts out with some pirates, because now there's an introduction of different pirate crews and stuff, and pirates are out searching in this area where there's a wellspring, and they are attacked by creatures who follow Aquila. There's a wizard that's an octopus squid person looking thing. Eventually, we get to, this is a separate point, but there is a peace summit where the Valkyrie Generals are trying to come together and find peace, basically, because tensions are rising between them despite the alliance that there once was, and now they're having some issues. And this also introduces some of the new Valkyrie Generals, such as Revna, and I'm assuming Volrak will come into play as well. In this peace summit, things get heated, people kind of start fighting again, and people who were once allied all of a sudden are now at odds, as Vidar kind of backs away from the alliance, becoming very weary and skeptical of the other Valkyrie Generals, and the fighting heats up again. There is some more lore about Age of Annihilation, but we don't have a whole lot of it yet. It's still being written and coming out, so I will definitely talk a lot more about that in future videos, especially my Sonlin's Journal videos, which I've only got one of right now, but I will continue to do them as more comes out. But that is the general story of Heroscape for anyone that is wondering. And if you want more Heroscape lore, hit the subscribe button. I've got tons of it on this channel. I have plenty of read-throughs where I actually go through each of Thormoon's journals, as well as Sonlin's journals, and the Heroscape comics. You can actually go and check that out in my playlists for Heroscape lore or Thormoon's journals. And go ahead and like this video if you think this sounds interesting, and I highly encourage anyone out there to go and get yourself a Heroscape battle box or a master set and give it a try. This is a great game, so great that I've dedicated my entire channel to it. So I definitely hope more people will check it out. If you're still here this long into the video, I would like to put a quick little ad in for my own personal fantasy novel that I've written called The Price of Renewal. This is available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. For the ebook is only $5. So any of you Kindle readers out there, you've got the best deal right there. I appreciate all the support, everyone, and thanks for stopping by the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.